Thank you very much. Do you hear me? Yes. I hope that I don't have to make the same presentation of all my colleagues in the panel, because there are much more to say about them than about my modest person. Anyway, the task for us today is speaking about moving beyond the clash of civilizations, the role of art and culture in changing the paradigm of international relations. It's a very big issue. Let me start with a little story before I go to the colleagues. Richard Strauss is a very German composer, and probably not the first person you think of when thinking of transnational or culture beyond borders, etc. But one of his famous operas is Salome, which is, as you may know, based on a little chapter in the Bible, but particularly on a play by Oscar Wilde. It's about the girl who wants the prophet Johanna's head on a silver plate. The music this opera was presented a few months ago at the Washington National Opera. A conductor was a Frenchman. The Salome was an American lady. Herodias was a German lady, happens to be my wife, Doris Soffel. Herodes was an Englishman. Narabot was a Spaniard, and so on. Great success, wonderful premieres performance, premiere party, for opening party afterwards. Host is Placido Domingo, and some 80 or 100 people are present. We end up at a table, and all of a sudden, my wife makes a little signal to me. Have you seen the guy who's sitting here next? She's better at faces than I am, so she had to whisper to me later, "Don't you see, it's the Imam of New York?" I'm telling this because he came to see this strange Jewish based opera about Salome only 1 month after he became world famous in this story about the pastor in Florida who wanted to burn the Quran as a punishment to his plans to build a Muslim center in Wall Street. But he came to this opera performance, and we found that as a very, very interesting and nice example that perhaps there are bridges after all. The Clash of Civilizations, it looks like this in the famous book by Huntington. It came out 1996. It has, I think, Mr. Dalderis had been speaking about the fall of the communist society. We had the Cold War for about from 1947 till 1991 between the two superpowers. When that was ended, another big American professor, Mr. Fukuyama, said, "Now this is the end of history." This because now there's no conflict anymore, and liberal democracy has won, and let's say capitalism has also won. So now everybody can be happy and keep working, and everything will be fine. But Mr. Huntington had another view. He said, man cannot live, or nations can hardly live without antagonism somehow. And so say, what will be the new antagonism? And then he formulated this idea about the clash of civilizations, and saying that they may have, he didn't say that definitely, they may have a religious ground, this clash. Then only one word before I go to the colleagues about why did he think religions would take over, and why has it happened that so many people in so many countries and so many extreme parties and so on are taking these religious issues so seriously? Well, I think this started 10 years before the end of the Cold War. This started about 1978, 79, 1980, because this was the wake of religion, or the re-wake, the renaissance of religion in the public global discourse. We had the Pope Wojtyła coming into the Vatican with a very strong political agenda, which even successfully contributed to the fall of the communist empire. We had almost at the same time, in 79, Ayatollah Khomeini came to Iran and became a very important inspirator of extreme Islamism. And at the same time, 1980, Ronald Reagan became president in the United States, which, for some reasons which it would take long time to look into, also somehow inspired some very radical movements of so-called evangelicals and other religious groups in the United States. The religion was from that on more and more on the agenda than the ideologies were. And when the ideologies more or less stopped to compete with each other, early 90s, then the religions, it was, let's say, a vacuum for them to fill. These just some thoughts to inspire your further comments. And of course, I would ask to say ladies first, and ask Miss Dr. Tomur Atagok to comment perhaps from a Turkish artistic perspective what we can do and what will happen.
Thank you. Okay. I will go back a little bit into the history, if you don't mind. When the Turkish Republic was established in 1923, Atatürk made some good decisions for the country and and for the world peace. One of them was to claim Saint Sophia as a museum, rather than turning it into a religious institution, Islamic Jami. I think this was a very smart idea. Another one was turning most of the, big palaces into museums. Another important thing was to have education institutions move into the rich buildings of the top governing bodies. So this was making use of the spaces for education and for culture. Later on, we had the village institutes in the smaller areas of the rural areas for the peasant children who could not go to the bigger cities. And then we had also opened up city halls for the people to practice art, concerts, and have theaters come and go. So this went on for a long time, making people, common people, start appreciating art and music. What is interesting is that I think as a beginning, it was very important that the state took over the founding of cultural institutions. But what's happening as time goes by, we are looking to a lack of mission in many of the institutes. We used to think in terms of, moving beyond the clash of civilization, peace, art for everyone. And now the people working for these institutions are not feeling the necessity of what they are doing. So there's a lack of professionalism in what they are doing. But what is more interesting is also we used to have the British Council, American Information Center, Goethe Institute, Italian, Spanish people bringing artists and helping to contribute to Turkish art scene. Somehow, in the recent years, I noticed we are getting less and less of the assistance from the countries that we have always worked with. I have to say that in the early 40s, we had a lot of German Jews or Jews from Germany come to Turkey to assist us with our cultural activities, with our education. I can just off my list say Paul Hindemith was in Turkey for some time to set the Turkish conservatoires, the music conservatoires, and we have dealt with the reciprocal activities. But what's happening in the recent years that we are getting less assistance or less relations from the countries that we have been working with. Instead of we have people like Soros moving in. Now, we have to think about it. Soros seems to be very opinionated, open society. And he's done very well in the Balkans, giving money for a lot of activities. I don't know whether they are supposed to return the money or not. And now he's moved to Azerbaijan, and we have some relations developing in Turkey. Now I have to think about it. The government is not doing that much. We have private companies moving in, and luckily we have banks supporting some of the art activities. So I'm hoping that some of our old-time friends, the countries, will take a look at their program and say, are we really contributing to the world peace?
Thank you very much indeed. I give the floor to Mr. Timothy Emlyn Jones.
Thank you very much. I'm really struck by the use of the word clash in the title. Why a clash? What is a clash? Where does it come from? Now, my approach is from art and the practice of art, and I'm an artist who's very concerned about the process of how art works. And this is what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow. So I want to be careful not to encroach too much on tomorrow's talk now. But problem solving is a creative process. Paradigm change is a creative process. And one of the key things in creative process, I think, is seeing where you are in relation to your issue or your problem. Because once you see yourself in relation to the problem, you very often see the problem or the issue, whatever it is, very differently. Because you're seeing it in the way in which you can see it. The problem that you're perceiving is mediated by the apparatus that you have to perceive it, by which I mean your personality. So I'm talking about cognitive difference. You can't change a paradigm unless you see the paradigm. But the paradigm are your terms of reference. The art historian Ernst Gombrich described it really very well some years ago when he talked about it as mental furniture. It's what you sit on, it's what you eat on, it's how you live, what you sleep on, it's how you live your life. It's what you take for granted. And to question that is, I think, crucial. So it's not a job that could be handed over to anyone. It's something which is a problem, it's an issue that has to be owned. Now, art can be, undoubtedly, in my opinion, part of that. But the idea that politicians can look to the diplomats, and the diplomats can look to the artists to build these bridges, I think it's a very narrow view. We need to look at this mindset that we're operating in. So if you're clashing, who are you clashing with? I mean, some of the most violent clashes are between siblings, typically when they're very, very young, or in the frame of mind of someone who is very, very young. That's mine. Give it to me. And maybe you think that, one might think that one's actually disagreeing with a total stranger because they're so different, when you're actually disagreeing with a sibling. The commonality of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity strikes me as immensely larger and more influential than those differences, which are, of course, very, very obvious. It's a sibling relationship. Or are you clashing with the guy next door, which is probably territorialism? Or are you clashing with a total stranger? And why? Again, probably territorialism. I was very struck in thinking about this question by the president of Xi'an Academy of Fine Arts in China, when he, in a debate very much like this, was saying, look, Tim and the others from Europe, we want to be your friends, but we want also to be ourselves. And there's a long tradition in China of isolationism, which has no animosity at all to the West, but is to do with the strength of self-identity. If one respects that, then there's a basis for friendship. So the terms of reference within which one engages, I think, are crucial. One person's globalism or internationalism is another person's cultural imperialism. Should you really be giving something to somebody who doesn't want to receive it? Should you really force it on them? Can you respect your neighbour? Now, these distinctions are really far-reaching. Coming across town yesterday from the airport, I was struck by something I think I already knew, but it became really, really clear. Is that if a person really wanted to study the style of Greek architecture, and I mean the style rather than Greek buildings. One of the best places to see Greek buildings, of course, is Turkey. But yeah, the amphitheatres, they're all in Turkey, most of them. You could actually do better than going to a Greek city. You could come to Berlin, and you could do what I did, which is take a taxi that runs you down, or you could walk down Unter den Linden. Wonderful resource of information about architectural style. If you really wanted to study the French language and how it operates, you do well to explore it in England, in America, because you'd be looking for je ne sais quoi, quelque chose. Our terms of reference are international. Something that really struck me, I've been in Ireland now 8 years, and I did a journey which many people regard as a mission. Sometimes it's a tourist journey, sometimes it's a cultural journey, to visit the Aran Islands. They're off the coast of the Burren, which is where I live. They're just a 30-minute boat ride away, which W.B. Yeats thought was the most remote part of Europe, with the ancient Celtic tradition is still alive. And I was very struck that first the people who greet you coming off the boat, they're trying to take money off you, look like Irish people looked in the 1930s. And everybody else looks like Americans. And of course a lot of them were Americans. There was a fair number of American tourists. But then so was the guy serving behind the bar, so was the people working in the fast food hamburger joint, and everyone else. So we behave internationally without thinking about it. It's all of this stuff that we do without thinking about it. So
we have to...
Yeah. So the subject, the core of this, I think, is commonality and difference. and to recognize that the two are deeply interactive and engaged, and art, of course, expresses both.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to Mr. Dalderis. Please, you get it last.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If we are talking about the role of art and culture, I would like to stress my attitude attitude to cultural education. Actually, I think this is the one. If we are talking that clash of civilization is a bad thing, of course, if we agree with that, I think it's very important that we see that well-educated people and creative people, creative person, it's always is open-minded and artists are very tolerant. If we are talking about this in my keynote speech, I told about this end of Cold War, and I think this after that Cold War we had very hard, it's very difficult situation, national situation. It's a small example in our country because many people we had very just. Half of population was Latvians and others people who came in last years. And what was the reason we have still very good contact and very good it's peaceful process. We are living in peace in our country because if you can believe if we would have such situation in other cities, in other state, in other countries, it would be always very, very dangerous situation. But I think that one of the reasons we had this peaceful time last 20 years is that we have very good level of tolerance, and one of the reasons of that tolerance is cultural education, and this is very important because now we have this network of we have just 2.2 million inhabitants in Latvia, and we have 100 music schools, 50 state-funded art schools, and as well we have very good education in ordinary schools about the arts. And it helps. I am sure that it helps a lot for that we have this peaceful last 20 years in our country. And I think this is a good example for all society of global village. I can say how to live together and with tolerance and understanding each other. And I think this role of cultural education, and I have met many of my colleagues in different countries, ministers of culture, and we all always agree with that now we should stress our attitude to this very important thing. It's not just about art, it's not just about culture, it's about the future at all. It's very, very important. That's my thoughts about that.
Thank you very much indeed. I give the floor to Ambassador Simonyi.
I was going to offer all my time to Tim because I really liked the way he was explaining the issue. I happen to have had the opportunity to meet Fukuyama on numerous occasions, and the one topic he desperately wanted to avoid is his thesis on the end of history. And honestly, he's an amazing person. He is a deep thinker. He's a great scholar. But on this, he was utterly wrong. And it was an awkward situation because who am I, to put him on the spot? But actually, it is really weird because even way back when he wrote about this, I never believed that he was right. Where did he put his mind in terms of his study of world history? And it's interesting because from time to time, the same thing happens with the economy when, for example, the dot-com economy, when people started saying, well, it's the end of economy as we knew it, and this is fabulous, and you'll see this is all the difference, and it's not a bubble, but it's the end of economy or something like that. And it wasn't, and Fukuyama was dead wrong, and the economists who were actually the economists of the dot-com bubble were dead wrong. What I want to say is I don't want to. First of all, I don't think we have the answer to what we're trying to figure out here. The fact is, that every single day, we're confronted with the fact we don't know the answer, and those who pretend are the ones who are really causing trouble. The ones who are causing trouble are the extremists, the ideologues, the ones who have great ideas. It's the leaders with the great ideas that really cause trouble. And that's really the point. So I would be very cautious first of all, I don't believe in the clash of civilizations as such. I believe in the clash between freedom and authoritarian regimes. I believe in the clash in the arts between nationalist art and art that is global and human. I believe in conflicting and competing thoughts, which is far from a clash. But I'd also like to conclude with the fact that one should not take this easily, because the threats from extremism is always there. The threats from minority complexes driving leaders vis-a-vis their neighbors, and I must say that but my country is definitely not immune to this, is there. So the bottom line is that it's good we discuss it, but I think it is so important that we discuss it knowing that we do not have the answer.
Here. Mark will introduce Mr. Tweedy.
Very briefly, since we have not yet had the chance to properly introduce Mr. Tweedy, who just arrived here to Germany. Mr. Colin Tweedy is one of the leading global figures on the connections between culture, connectivity, and commerce. He has a Master of Arts from St. Catherine's College, Oxford, and serves on the boards of several different UK and international arts committees. He is also the director of the Ideas Foundation, a council member of the National Musicians Symphony Orchestra, and the governor of the University for the Creative Arts. He is also a trustee of the Serpentine Gallery, the Ideas Foundation, and a council member of the National Musicians Symphony Orchestra. He has been the chief executive of arts and business in the United Kingdom for over 25 years and is the chairman of the CEREC, le Comité Européen pour le Rapprochement de l'Économie et de la Culture. So please, maybe we could have a brief welcome also to Mr. Tweedy, who's just joining us.
I feel very humble in such a distinguished and intellectual group. My task in my professional life is to try to get business people to give money to culture. And normally the last thing you do is try and imply an intellectual argument. I also had to get up at 3:30 this morning in London. So I won't fall asleep, but my intellectual reasoning may be impaired. But I'm very conscious that as we are speaking about moving beyond the clash of civilizations, that actually our civilizations are clashing in some of the areas of the world which the British perhaps did not do too well in. Bahrain and Egypt, for example, where society is being transformed as we speak. The British and the Americans are watching with grave concern particularly in Bahrain, which of course is very much a Western island, literally. The Bahrainian royal family have many homes in England, as Mubarak had. We have half of London seems to be the home of totalitarian leaders. They come for the British culture. So I'm not sure what that says about our society, but joking apart, I'm always conscious that it was often, culture has always been international. It was international when our language of the intellect was Latin, then of course it was French, and of course now, fortunately for me, it is now English. I was very struck that in the 16th century, in a fencing school in Gdansk, or Danzig as some people called it, Shakespeare sent a troupe of players contemporaneously when he was putting on Hamlet at the Globe in South London. He was performing Hamlet for English traders in the Hanseatic League in Gdansk. People often forget that actually that internationalism has always been at the bedrock of culture. The Sistema project of South America has taken Britain by storm. The young music group who have inspired the Western world from Latin America, there is now a base of the Sistema music program in Scotland. 2 nights ago, Robert Lepage, one of the great French-speaking Canadian theatre directors, opened his play about modern China at the Barbican Theatre. Britain's greatest classical conductor, Simon Rattle, is of course the maestro of the Berlin Philharmonic. I'm aware that art has often been transferred across the world, some by trade and some by brute force. I'm conscious in the presence of the brother of the great Melina Mercouri, who once challenged me to bring the Parthenon frieze back to Greece. I said that my duty-free and my baggage allowance would not perhaps allow me. But joking apart, I'm very conscious that what Napoleon did and the British Empire did by force is, of course, marked often the modern world. The British Museum is one of the great treasure houses of the world, but it's also a mark also of theft and of power and of brute force. But it's quite interesting to think that the great art of the Gonzaga family in Mantua was sold to Charles I of England, and when he lost his head, Oliver Cromwell, who was the Lord Protector, sold it to the Spanish Habsburg crown, and now we see it in Prado. It was very conscious that when the great Chinese artist Weiwei was under house arrest in Beijing, his major exhibition at the Turbine Hall of Tate Modern was just opening. And it was in the Financial Times, the front page, talking about the totalitarianism still in this great new economic power, China, but it was being discussed through the power of a great artist. Of course, the world of Facebook and Twitter is transforming the younger generation's view of the world. And I would like to just briefly conclude is that so many people of my generation are just waking up to the fact that what Google has just announced with its art project, where we are now seeing art across the world from great museums with a microscopic intensity which has never been seen before. We are seeing things in art in the last 3 weeks we have never seen before, but we're able to share it internationally through the internet. So I have huge optimism for the world, in spite of what is perhaps happening in the Middle East and will happen all over the world. But culture is so international that I think the artist will always be able to open our ears and our eyes and our souls, and perhaps that peace will come and our clash. When we understand each other through art, we'll understand each other better through politics.
Thank you very much, Colin. I now give the floor to my friend Erna Hennicot-Schoepges. I'm still looking forward to the day when we are making music together. Erna is a very good pianist. But now you are invited to speak on this subject.
Thank you. Well, the plaidoyer of my neighbor is making me showering. It certainly is a big speech and is true, all you said. But I'm questioning myself, the farmer in the France Profonde or the employee in some German village. Do they get all this? And do they perceive art and culture the same way as they are looking only one TV chain every time the same, getting only news from Germany or from their small part of France, reading only newspapers with regional reportage? And what is coming from this culture resources we have to those people? I think that's our main challenge, to bring culture to the bottom, to the ground, to the very places where the manipulation of other forces can be in a very destructive way influencing people. I notice in this round nobody pronounced the word religion except Kark-Erik. And the clash about what was spoken in the Book of Huntington, well, isn't it a bit the counterpart to what the European Value Study is saying us? In the European Value Study, it's a huge scientific exercise of more countries than those in the European Union. The analysis, what is making people confident? Do they trust politicians? No. Do they trust religious leaders? No. They don't trust churches. They have a very low esteem of politics, religions, and journalists. They are on the same level of esteem. But citizens are very concerned about religion. They are very concerned about philosophy. And so, who is taking in charge? Those people who don't know anything about culture, who are not multilingual, who only speak one language. And they are still a majority of the population because they are not on Facebook and not on Twitter. And they do not handle those new information technologies. And there I am afraid of the closing the eyes of politics. When we launched the European Year of Intercultural Dialogue, religion was not in. The text said it will be dialogue with cultures, and the parliament had an amendment. And the amendment came through to make it interreligious as well. The amendment was passed in the parliament with one vote majority. There has been a very serious debate. But the outcome of the final text was people from different beliefs. The word religion was not mentioned. When we had in the parliament the debate about the caricature of Mohammed, one outstanding parliamentarian, Daniel Cohn-Bendit, said, well, we are ignoring religion. We should take in account what religious leaders are saying. And we should discuss it. We have to discuss it. We have to know. So my concern in this debate, in this panel, is how shall we deal with this? Culture is assuring us freedom of speech, freedom of expression. The music is giving us a wonderful tool of together, of feeling together, of having the relationship with emotion and feelings. But all this, I'm afraid it will not come to the point that we avoid people manipulating those who are not at the same level of education. Only few % of our populations are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erna. Mark, I have the impression you put this title to challenge us, going beyond the clash of civilization. I sometimes think that this Institute of Cultural Diplomacy is an answer to that one. I try to a way to to show that Huntington was wrong.
Yes and no. There I'm thinking of what Ambassador Simonyi said. We have to be careful for those who claim to have the answers. So in that sense, I don't want to claim that we have the answers. I just wanted to underline some of the wonderful comments that actually in reflections we heard by saying I only have two problems with the Clash of Civilizations thesis. The use of the word civilization and the use of the word clash. Aside from that, it's not as much of an issue. What I mean by that is if you look at the first 20 pages of the book of Samuel Huntington, you'll notice he has a number of maps where he tries to actually classify the world. And he uses these big generalizations. Of course, he talks about Islamic civilization, where he groups together all of the different interpretations of the Quran into one. He talks about Western civilization, where he groups together all those countries he considers Western into one. And as we all know, of course, that makes no sense. And I think the reason why it's important that we discuss this today is even though probably everyone in this room understands the incredible disservice that these maps do to the world, we do have to acknowledge, as Ambassador Simonyi said, that for some actually, this is actually a rational way of looking at the world. And some individuals do think that we live in a clash of civilizations. Some individuals think even September 11th that was some sort of a beginning. There I disagree. So this is to the second point in terms of clash. I don't think we're in a clash of civilizations. And I think it's very confusing and dangerous to try to think of the world in this way. The reason why we also put this topic on the agenda, however, is we do have to acknowledge the fact that actually there are individuals in the world, sometimes large groups of individuals, who actually do see this in this way. There are some, as you were saying, that claim to have the answers and say, this is how it is, whether it's the axis of the good or the axis of the evil or however we want to group this. And I think it is important that we acknowledge that and recognize the fact that I think the best service we could do, maybe as cultural diplomats or as artists, is to try to break some of these larger stereotypes, to realize actually the diversity that there is within Islam, within the West, within all of these groupings. So actually the challenge that we have, I guess, as cultural diplomats is somehow, as you were saying, to try to do the opposite, to really think critically about these words. I had a wonderful conversation with Jorge Sampaio, the former president of Portugal, who's also now the head of the Alliance of Civilizations for the United Nations. And he even himself said, even though he's in charge of the Alliance of Civilizations, which in many ways has a wonderful mandate, he also has some problems with the use of that word civilization. So I think somehow we, as you said, need to do the opposite. We need to zoom in closer. We need to realize the complexities of these identities. And I think that's the amazing potential that I see with arts, with music, with culture. I think the chance when we can actually have those moments to reflect, those moments to be inspired, those moments to challenge maybe the status quo, to challenge the normal way of looking at things, or let's say the official way of looking at things. And I think that's something that really only artists can do. I think there, in terms of the authenticity, in terms of the creativity, that's the challenge that we have. And I think there, if the cultural domain doesn't do that, who will? And I think that's really a wonderful compliment that isn't always applauded enough, that I think really artists and the cultural field can have in this broader spectrum of things, where unfortunately too many do think of things in terms of a clash of civilizations. So I just wanted to add that small point. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Before I give the floor to the audience here, I just want two small points. I would be curious on Timothy, to what extent arts and culture solved or contributed to a peaceful solution of the Northern Irish conflict, which was going on for such a long time. And the second is to Erna, to what extent are European values, you mentioned European values, as something that should be missioned. You mentioned the risk about mission. Mission is called then as cultural imperialism and so on. But how strong are European values in, let's say, in a global context for this for peace, as from your experience from the European Parliament? Tim, please.
To what extent has did art contribute to the solution of the Northern Ireland situation? I'm not so sure it did. Did it contribute? Well, yes. And I cited one example yesterday that comes back to mind, which was the public art, the murals and graffiti that you find in Derry. You can get a huge message across very, very simply. Because one of the most striking things in Derry are these wall paintings, and the one that I mentioned yesterday, I'll mention it briefly again, which is that when you're standing in on the walls of Derry facing north towards the bog side, the most striking thing you see is this legend saying, "You are now entering free Derry," addressed to people who consider Derry to be Londonderry. Historically, because the merchants of London put so much money into the town that they acknowledged it by putting the name there. Another point of contribution, I think, would be art contributed a still point of calm in otherwise desperate circumstances. Number of galleries. The musical tradition provided a sense of commonality, but I think it would be dressing up art in the inappropriate clothing to suggest that it has a utilitarian value. Its value is in helping us to understand values. I mean, we heard the point a few minutes ago. I think very well made. That if you can enter into art, then you begin to change your paradigm of the world. But it has to be an active engagement. The presentation of art as a consumer product has a very different kind of significance to the engagement of art in an active point. I remember when I was a student, it being pointed out to me, someone who was making the claim that art will solve the problems of the world. An account of the coincidence of a concert being performed by concentration camp inmates to the German troops at the same time as the gas was being put into the showers. Many of the Nazis were great connoisseurs of music. Did it change anything?
Mr. Kark-Erik was a poet.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
It's not you are not automatically good just because you are in the arts.
No,
I think.
I'm talking about the practice of art. Just because you're involved in the practice of art doesn't mean you're any good either. No, the engagement with the arts has to be an active one. And I'll be talking about this tomorrow, about what the nature of that process is. Because the kinds of intelligence with which you have to engage in order to be involved in creative production of any kind is such that it changes your mindset, it changes your paradigm. It makes certain things not impossible, but it shifts your attention. Meaning comes through attention, where you are capable of giving your attention, and in what ways. So that's what it can change. If art can change your mindset, if your involvement with it is active. The poem by Rainer Maria Rilke comes to mind, The Archaic Torso of Apollo, in which, to cut a long, it's not actually a long poem, I was going to say to cut a long poem short, it's actually quite a short one. But it's, in it, he is engaging with the the sculpture of Apollo is currently in the Vatican, in which he describes the experience of the sculpture, and concludes with the message for the sculpture, from the sculpture, is you must change your life. And the engagement, a passive engagement with the art will change nothing.
Thank you. Erna, please.
I think common European values are fixed in the Charter of the Human Rights. We have in the Charter, the European Charter, so we agreed on common rules. But how we set in force these common rules, that's a major problem. It remains a problem of majority cultures, for instance, and rights and rights given and rights linked to who you are. So that's a big difference. How can we succeed? I think small member states have a message to tell to bigger member states, as they succeeded liberation from the Russians, as Luxembourg is in between three big neighbors, and succeeding in surviving with 49% of non-Luxembourgers resident population, by multilingualism, by co-education at a very young age. At the age of 3, children are going to the only one public school. That's the same model for each child. But it needs a very big effort from the national community to survive with an own national language, to have multilingualism, to have the problem of unemployment, and to have the problem of the different cultures living together, to be accepted. It's not enough to live one near the other. Tolerance is not enough. We need acceptance, and their culture has to make its proofs.
Thank you very much. Now I leave the floor. I open the floor. Yes, Ambassador of Latvia, please.
Well, thank you very much. I'll try to get at least some disagreement among the panelists about one seems to be oversimplified issue, but what I heard, what was said in the presentations, and indeed about touching upon the culture, art, and about the religion, and this example of Muhammad cartoons, drawings published in newspapers. And then looking at this headline, how the role of art and culture and how it can change the paradigm of international relations and move beyond the clash of civilizations. How do you think this? I would like to ask the question: how do you think can we or can the artists do not only positive things but also a damage, basically, by their works? And in this concrete example with Muhammad cartoons, and where is the right answer or balance? Or shall we carry on like okay, we are living in Denmark, Germany, or Latvia, we don't care what the others think. We are living here, we do what we want. We draw what we want. It's freedom of speech, and regardless of whatever, it's freedom, democracy. Or shall we take into account and adjust? But then we how much do we adjust our societies to I don't know, accepting the views of other societies, other countries on their sensitive issues, also involving religion? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who is prepared to comment on that? Yes.
I have a very brief response. The world is full of people wanting to be upset, wanting to be annoyed, because it provides them then the opportunity to advance their cause. The problem there is not the artist, it's the person who wants to be upset by the artist or anybody else who comes up with something. So, do you think artists should be mute?
Hear, hear. That was, I think, a very excellent answer. I would have said the same thing myself. Who more? Yes, the lady there, please.
Yes, I have a question about active versus passive participation and continuing this conversation of art in the public space, this idea of opening up art to as many people as possible as opposed to theaters or museums, which can sometimes only cater to certain populations, usually that can afford to go. But in a public space, I'm wondering how you would see active versus passive participation. For instance, murals, if you're in Belfast or Derry, it's something that possibly people aren't having an active participation with studying them and intellectually thinking about how it applies to them, but sort of this subconscious that happens of where you belong and where you don't belong based on these images that seep into your mind. And conversely, I come from a city where murals are used in a very different way as symbols of peace and an integrated community. So I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on that, to not have
Which city was that?
Philadelphia. And there was actually a contingent of Northern Irish young people that came over and did a mural tour, just to kind of see a contrast in that way. But we had talked about the concept of a naked public space and what do you put into it in order to have a meaningful interaction with art that's there.
Thank you very much. I think I will ask a few more people to ask, and then we will have comments from the panel. Well, down there, yes, the gentleman there. No, that. Oh, that gentleman.
Sorry. Well, the title of the entire conference is called The Language of Art and Music, and here we talk specifically about international relations. And as somebody mentioned here, it used to be that we talked Latin to be international, then it was French, and now it's English. Again, good for me as well, that is English, since I come from Norway. And my Latin is very bad. Anyway, aren't we seeing a problem here? Because once you define art, music, etc., as a language, you think in terms of transmitting and receiving a message. And when I learned English, I had to learn lots of different phrases, and they explain, no, this means something different in English, etc. Whereas when it comes to art, you can watch something, and you can listen to something, which is the same as somebody else watches and listens, and increasingly it is so in a globalized world. But what you see in it and what you hear in it is very, very different. So just to give an example, I studied a project in Norway which used music in schools from immigrant communities to increase understanding between different groups. And the teachers and the organizers, they had a lot of knowledge about the music, and for them it was a proud tradition being presented. Whereas for the kids, they talked about it as, oh, is this how they dress in the jungle? Is this the sort of music the jungle people listen to? Not because they were racist directly, or they just didn't have the same background. So when somebody comes and dances in front of them in a grass skirt, it's perceived very differently than the intention of the teachers and the organizers. So therefore, is art as a language a problem for international relations rather than a benefit? Cheers.
Thank you. And down there, the gentleman standing there behind, yes.
I have a short comment and then a really short question. I think when we're talking about religion, we should be very, very careful. To give the example of Ireland, there was no conflict because Catholics believed that the communion became Christ and Protestants didn't. That was not what the conflict was about. It's a question of a larger identity.
Can you hold the microphone a little bit away from your mouth, because
it's good?
Thank you.
Okay.
Better so.
So religion forms part of an identity rather than a trigger for a conflict itself. My question is, the current threat of extremism is very, very difficult to define territorially. So how can we apply art and culture to help counter something which we can't define territorially?
Yes.
You know, I've been giving a lot of thought to what I've heard over the last few days. I think it's important to understand from whence we came. I have to thank my colleague here, Darius, for giving me some information off the internet. I was vaguely aware of the data, but he kind of like nailed it down for me. I mean, some of the oldest cave paintings are 30,000, years old. And in the case of Australia, 40,000 or 42,000. And the questions that are being posed here, that we're being confronted with, most certainly were also the questions that were in the minds of the people at that particular time. Now, all things being equal, let's say 42,000 years ago in Australia people were painting, then we would have to have a certain succession of events leading up to the point where people would even think about, ponder putting something on a cave wall. They have to have time to do it. We have to assume people were hunters and gatherers. Someone had to take time out from that, either after the hunt or during the hunt while other people were out trying to survive or moving to survive. A person had to have time to do all of these things. So I think the question of art has to be defined, but you cannot define it without understanding its origins. When was it art? Was it art when he took the first stroke? Was it art when it was in his mind? All of these questions, it's important to understand. We have to go back to the beginning, or as far back as we can go, because even the data that we do have is controversial, and a lot of people don't agree with it. All right, they say it's even older, or what have you. But to understand art, and just one other thing, the role of art and culture, I don't know why they get separated. I don't know why art doesn't come under culture. I didn't understand that. And because we human beings mimic everything around them. I look at this audience right here. I see nature. Music came from people mimicking animals. It must have been that way. They dressed themselves in particular cultures, as we all know, mimicking the animals around them. There's so many questions here that relate to this question of defining art and for me, defining culture.
Thank you. One more question, then the panel will go. Didn't I see a lady over there? No. Yeah. Who was it? No, the hands. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So my name's George from the UK. I went to the Berlinale last night to see a film a friend of mine, Casper Gober's made, and he says hi to Ints for supporting his film. And the film was about lesbian gay community in Riga trying to organise gay pride, and how that caused a massive problem and was seized by different groups in Latvia, religious groups, people who kind of uneducated groups. It was kind of like a witch hunt against homosexuals. Homosexuals are leaving Latvia, and it's kind of like a internationally for Latvia. If these fundamental human rights aren't respected, how that affects your international relations. But yeah, it seemed to raise a lot of questions which we're discussing and which are important. I don't know if you've seen the film.
No, unfortunately.
Okay. And also, this film hasn't been shown in Riga. I think it's going to be shown at a film festival. I don't know if it is going to be.
I have on DVD, but I still not I haven't seen it.
Okay. So yeah, that's the question. Thank you.
So then I shall not ask you to comment on that last question. Otherwise, you are welcome to comment on the other questions that have been put. The microphone.
Yeah, as I said, I can't comment this film, but as member of parliament, we had interesting talks about this film when the movie makers came to Parliament Commission of Culture and told about the movies, and one of deputies said, "I don't think so. This is the most important. Problem now, and about what we are spending money, government money for such problems. We have much more important problems." And that in this discussion started very. It was a real big discussion in our commission, and then somebody asked to this deputy and asked, "Did you see this film?" "Oh no, of course, but I don't think so. This is this is a big problem now. And this I don't think so. I can't comment because me as well, I haven't seen this film, but of course in this movie, I suppose, and I know this those people who made this movie, I think this is this small example of big problems, not just in Latvia, but around the world. The same of how to live together, different groups, and I don't think so. This like issue of this panel, of course, but I see that it's become very close to this issue, and I think the film is very good from that point that it shows how art and cinema can help us to understand real processes in society. I think it's the way how we can make our society better. I think it's okay. It's one just example, and we have many interesting ideas we heard here about the clash, and but I can agree that at first we would like to, when we would agree with Mark, that now at first we should be clear about this. What is the civilization? What the clash is? And I think it's what does it mean? And because we have so many different meanings about that, and I think the civilization, we have many definitions of about what is it, and I can't say exactly just one definition. It's not clear for me as well. I can say honestly, what does it mean, civilization, in just one, very strictly. But I would like to conclude. For conclusion, I still believe that art is not going to solve all problems, but it's very significant instrument for understanding what's really going on and what's really important for everyone. And this is I as artist, as musician, and every day when I come to the stage, I understand my role in such process, and I try to do my best, really, how to complete this my mission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Atagok. Do you have any comments on? No, I don't. You have no comments on what has been said. Then I have one more question, which yes, please, a short one because we are running out of time.
Well, I question myself according also now to the movements, democratic movements in Egypt, Tunisia, etc. In how far the basis of the conflicts. I would never say clashes, and not using civilizations, but the conflicts between countries is not based more or less on first the misled of political leaders and the misuse of religious basics and the economical basics which people do have in terms of having access to education, to job opportunities, and to build up a life which is comparable to those ones like the Western countries, and that causes conflicts between countries, and not so much the civilizations themselves. And therefore I think art is a fine thing to build bridges. But the basic is how people can build up life in democratic circumstances.
Thank you very much. We have to look at the time, and we make a final round, starting with Erna Hennicot-Schoepges. Final comment on the issue of this morning.
Thank you. Well, I comment the last intervention. I think we cannot forget the blow of the Coptic Church in Egypt. So it started with a very precise. It was not the origin of all what came out. And if you read the press in the West, what is the biggest fear of every commentator? It's the coming to power of the Muslim brothers. So, in some way, we are well concerned by a question concerning civilization, religion, or whatever you name it. I think going further in our regions in Europe, we must come to a common methodology of teaching history. History that is taught since the Second World War is so different in all the countries, and the messages sent are, if I say it briefly, the Brits have liberated us from the Nazis, and Luxembourg was not a country overrun. Latvia, they were joining the German forces, and there are so many misunderstandings in the history of people. And if you look at the maps, how today Romania and Hungary, neighboring countries, are constituted of many different linguistic and ethnical populations, you understand many of the problems people have. And if you want to solve problems and to understand each other, you first have to know where he comes from and what he's like.
Thank you, Erna.
Yes,
Colin Tweedy.
I'm very conscious of the phrase, if you don't study the past, you're doomed to repeat it. I'm very conscious that art movements always start as national movements and then become international movements. I mean, Florence in the 15th and 16th century was not just a small Tuscan town, it was one of the most important cultural and intellectual centres in the world. I'm often struck at how international so much art has become. If any of you have been to Francois Pinault's collection, the Dogana in Venice, he has the Palazzo Grassi, he now owns the Dogana, he bought it from the city of Venice. The Guggenheim wanted it as well, and so it was actually an auction of international museums or international sort of super corporates like Francois Pinault, who owns the Gucci Group. But if you go into the Dogana, one of the most beautiful buildings now renovated by Terrio Ando, you will basically see international art. You can't really tell where that art has come from. Can you tell where Jeff Koons comes from? Can you tell where Damien Hirst comes from? We know that they went to particular art schools, but their art has become international. I'm very conscious when you go on a train anywhere in the world now, graffiti is totally international. I'm always intrigued how every kid is graffiti art or is it vandalism? I mean, that's another subject. But how come everyone now paints the same graffiti? I mean, if you go to China or Japan or to Latin America or to Charlottenburg, I was watching on the bus coming from the airport. The graffiti is the same as in South London where I live. I'm also conscious that in Britain there's a bridge built by Norman Foster on the River Thames. There is Tate Modern on one side and St Paul's Cathedral on the other. If you go to St Paul's Cathedral, it will cost you £12 to enter. If you go to Tate Modern, it is free. More people now go to Tate Modern than to St Paul's Cathedral. Our cathedrals have become our galleries. For so much the West. Though I'm conscious that many people in the West, and I was very struck by your comments, obviously, that people who live in a small village have, in some ways, a cultural identity that someone who lives in central London has lost. I notice I'm just reminded myself that I collect Inuit art, Aboriginal paintings from Australia, KwaZulu-Natal beer pots from South Africa, and Japanese tea bowls. Why am I doing that? Because they are uniquely identified with communities, and they're all being made now. But more and more of our art, I notice the art on these walls. This is totally international art. It could be in any city in the world. And I think that it's an interesting movement where some people are, local communities are still very, very national and very, very specifically local, but more and more of our art is becoming global. And I'll finish with Seamus Heaney's comment, thinking about art of the mass of public. When Diana, the Princess of Wales, died, the whole of Britain went mad and started lighting candles and putting photographs of Diana on trees and in the parks next to Buckingham Palace. And Seamus Heaney said, this shows the power of the church, the power of Catholicism. We've gone back to the iconography of the Catholic Church by lighting candles, by putting pictures, is how much civilization will go back in times of national or international crisis, back to the roots of civilization and away from Jeff Koons and Damien Hirst.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I was recently in Denver, and my hosts told me that I definitely have to go and see the exhibition of King Tut. You know who King Tut is? Tutankhamun. That's the way they said in Denver. And it was a great exhibition, and it was amazing. A lot of people there. It's, by the way, a sellout exhibition. And at the end of the exhibition, you can virtually feel the cash register running all the time because Americans are buying all this incredibly ugly and tacky pieces of art. By the way, in one of the most beautiful arts museums in the United States. And I'm saying this because I just wonder how much this has helped America understand the situation in Egypt. So and I don't want to be, I don't want to be funny about this. I just want to make sure that, rest assured that sometimes arts and culture is a helpful tool. Sometimes it is definitely totally neutral, and at other times it's definitely destructive. It really depends on who and how and when uses it. And I say this from the point of view of a former practicing diplomat. And art and culture is not a magic stick. It's a tool. And in terms of in terms of furthering ideals and goals, and when it furthers ideals and goals that are on freedom, that are of democracy, that are about dignity, that are about the respect for other people, definitely use it as much as possible. But be aware of the fact that the same tools can be destructive in the hands of those who want to use it to cause misery, conflict, and you name it. I just want to come to the, not exactly in conclusion, come to the defense of artists and how the artists are put on a very, very hard spot in historic situations. You do know Feuchtwanger. There's still the debate about Feuchtwanger, whether he was a Nazi or whether he was not. And the most amazing footage about the torment of an artist ever I have seen it was the last days of the war in Berlin, and Feuchtwanger was conducting the Berlin Symphony Orchestra and playing the Fifth Symphony. And in the first row was Goebbels, okay? And at the end of the concert, Goebbels walks up to the stage, shakes hands with Feuchtwanger, and there's a 1-second scene in that footage when after Goebbels turns around, Feuchtwanger takes his handkerchief and dries his hand. And it wasn't because it was sweating. He wanted to wipe off the disgrace, and it was automatic and desperate. And I'm not the one who, who is going to say the final verdict on Feuchtwanger. I just want to say that let's try to look at this debate also from the point of view of the artist. And sometimes you come to a very, very tragic conclusion.
Yeah. Thank you very much. You are happy? Okay. On that one, I think it's important to remember that it took the Federal Republic of Germany from 1945 to 1998 before a minister for culture was appointed. And this was, of course, because the last minister who was in charge of culture was the named Goebbels. It took 2 generations almost before they could take this step to appoint a minister of culture, who still has not got a ministry, by the way, but only a portfolio.
I think I'm sorry. Yeah. I think it's important just for the younger generation, if you might not know, Goebbels was the propaganda minister of Hitler.
Yeah. Furtwängler, yeah. Feuchtwanger is an author.
Oops, Furtwängler. I'm sorry. Yes, Feuchtwanger. I'm so sorry.
Furtwängler.
Yes. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. This is a slip of a tongue.
You will have the word last.
I'm sorry. Wow, how embarrassed I am.
Yeah. Please. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to say, art is a language. The more people understand it, the more people speak it, I think we will have less problem, no matter what.
I agree with that, particularly when you regard the term language as a metaphor. My concluding comment, I'd like to respond to the question asked down here. When you're right to call me on the assertion that it's an active engagement with art rather than a passive one that will have the effect of change. But I want to be clear that I am not talking about the art of painting or the art of singing or the art of acting. I'm talking about the art of everything. A tremendously important influence on me as a younger artist was the German artist Joseph Beuys, with whom I've had the good fortune to exhibit several times and worked with him on the Free International University. And his fame was famous for the expression, everyone is an artist. And he was very explicit in saying, I do not mean that everybody is a painter or a writer or whatever. Why would they be? But they have the potential to transform any form of social action into art. And this is his concept of social sculpture. And I believe that the process of art can be transferred beyond the art of painting, sculpture, or whatever. And that is what I'm advocating, because that transforms your mindset, your way of engaging with the world, and puts you in a position when you're not going to fight because it's irrelevant.
Thank you. Mark.
I just wanted to underline something that Colin Tweedy said before in terms of graffiti. There are many who think the best way to get to know a city, either today or in the past, is not to look at its museums, but to look at its graffiti in terms of what's really going on. So I would encourage you, if you do in fact disagree with this thesis of the clash of civilizations, and if you agree with the thesis that we actually live in an interdependent world where more understanding and trust is necessary, I would encourage you, in light of Egypt, Tunisia, etc., let's take the time and let's take the energy not only to look at the museums, but also the graffiti of the cities and cultures around the world, not only the opera houses, but also the rock and rolls of those cultures as well, and probably will come even closer to the pulse of the people of the cultures that we're talking about.
Thank you very much, Mark. I was inspired by the comment back in the room here that we should recall that there are arts 30,000 years old, which are still relevant to us. I think when seeing this period we are living in now in a historical perspective, both possible clashes, conflicts, politicians and individuals who are fighting today might very well or are probably forgotten. But the arts created is going to survive and going to live much longer than all clashes and conflicts. And with these words, I thank the panel for having participated and the audience for their patience. Thank you very much.